I think it's not really going to be a problem for the regime at all. I think actually the gesture of laying flowers really speaks to the emotional state in which the opposition in Russia and the wider critical societies is right now. So this is not a collective action. I mean, people are going by themselves, maybe in smaller groups. Everything else would be permitted and repressed anyway. And so this really speaks to the atomized and depressed state in which Russian critical circles are in right now.
Yeah. Some people, though, have suggested that perhaps his death would galvanize the opposition in Russia. Do you think that's a possibility?
It is certainly, it's a possibility. We cannot rule it out. I don't think it's quite likely, though, unfortunately. I mean, you have examples of events like this really producing a lot of anger in people, and that also maybe helps them to overcome their fear of repression. But I would think that in this case, that's not likely to happen. The fear is just very strong, and the dominating emotion right now is not anger, as I can perceive it from here. It's more despair and hopelessness, and that's exactly the thing that the regime wanted to create with this action, whether it was a deliberate murder attempt or not. But hopelessness is really something that the regime is very, very keen on creating in the opposition.
Yeah, and as you say, we may never really know the true cause of his death. You know, world leaders have been quite strong, saying that Vladimir Putin is the man responsible for his death. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, this is a personalist authoritarian regime that has been created so that the person at the top, which is Vladimir Putin, has the power to intervene in most political decisions that are taken. And definitely the decision to lock up Navalny for so many years was something that was politically decided. And so whether this was a hit job in the prison or not, the responsibility is on the political leadership, definitely.
Yeah. I'm interested in what you see a situation like this and you wonder whether his decision to return to Russia to protest the regime was a wasted death in a way.
I think that he personally didn't really have a different choice. So he saw himself as a politician in Russia and not as a dissident who can influence affairs from outside of Russia. So he was really, he said that, and he had a big ego. But still, I think that is plausible that he had the urge to go back to Russia as soon as it was physically possible for him, and therefore, he also wanted to send a signal to his followers who remained in Russia, who were repressed very heavily as well. So he wanted to send a signal of hope and of courage that someone can actually survive this. And now he didn't, and that's why this is such a devastating signal for everyone who's still in Russia trying to effect some sort of change. So, I mean, as I said, he didn't really have a choice for himself, and that was the only logical thing for him to do.
But even if he viewed himself as a politician, he wasn't really able to impact the regime.
I mean, he couldn't have an impact in the democratic sense. The last time he was on a ballot was 10 years ago. I mean, you could also say only 10 years ago because so much has changed since then. But he has, through his actions, brought out the authoritarian character of the regime. The regime was forced to react to his challenges in more and more brutal ways if it wanted to survive as a regime, you could say. And it made certain decisions that made it much more brutal. It brought out this brutality. And so he did have an effect. It was clearly an unintended effect, and there were many other factors playing into that transformation of the authoritarian regime to such a brutal place. But definitely he was someone who was a threat to that regime, and that is the reason why he's dead now.
Yeah. What does this mean for other opponents of the regime? Some have even tried to get on the ballot. They've been disqualified. Some others are in jail.
It means a continuation of this brutalizing trajectory that the regime is on. I mean, unfortunately, this wasn't really unexpected. It was perhaps unexpected that it came so early. I had hoped, as many others, that Navalny might be able to survive Putin, at least politically. That wasn't the case. But the death, unfortunately, under these torture-like conditions, wasn't really something very unexpected. And it is the case for so many other people who are locked up, whose name we don't see on Western TV screens. So this is unfortunately no news for anyone who's politically active in Russia. And that's why so many chose to go into exile and to just wait for better times. The regime, unfortunately, just has the violence, the power to just dominate everything. Even if the opposition were organized much better, it was very unclear whether they have any chance right now, because apparently the regime is ready to use force and is not caring about what anybody outside the country says about it. So they have lost, apparently, all sense of dignity and morality quite long ago.
Yeah. So, and to that point, as we've seen with Ukraine, is there any point in trying to impose further sanctions on Russia?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, that's possible. That's, ethically probably the right thing to do. It will not change anything inside Russia. I'm quite convinced. So we were thinking that the economic sanctions, which are pretty tough, would change things. They haven't. And anything else that the international community might be doing will probably only reinforce the sense of this embattled fortress that the Russian regime is trying to create in the population. So I'm afraid that Russia is too powerful to be forced into action by sanctions right now, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't do them, but we should be realistic about their possible effects.
Really good to talk, Jan. Thanks very much.
Sure. Thanks for having me.